Third iteration. Details emerge more clearly as the fractal curve is redrawn. Ian Malcolm. Jurassic Park. They moved into a green tunnel of overarching palms leading toward the main visitor building. Everywhere, extensive and elaborate planting emphasized the feeling that they were entering a new world, a prehistoric tropical world, and leaving the normal world behind. Ellie said to Grant, "They look pretty good." "Yes," Grant said. "I want to see them up close. I want to lift up their toe pads and inspect their claws and feel their skin and open their jaws and have a look at their teeth. Until then, I don't know for sure. But yes, they look good." "I suppose it changes your field a bit," Malcolm said. Grant shook his head. "It changes everything," he said. For 150 years, ever since the discovery of gigantic animal bones in Europe, the study of dinosaurs had been an exercise in scientific deduction. Paleontology was essentially detective work, searching for clues in the fossil bones and the trackways of the long-vanished giants. The best paleontologists were the ones who could make the most clever deductions. And all the great disputes of paleontology were carried out in this fashion, including the bitter debate, in which Grant was a key figure, about whether dinosaurs were warm-blooded. Scientists had always classified dinosaurs as reptiles, cold-blooded creatures drawing the heat they needed for life from the environment. A mammal could metabolize food to produce bodily warmth, but a reptile could not. Eventually, a handful of researchers, led chiefly by John Ostrom and Robert Baker at Yale, began to suspect that the concept of sluggish, cold-blooded dinosaurs was inadequate to explain the fossil record. In classic deductive fashion, they drew conclusions from several lines of evidence. First was posture. Lizards and reptiles were bent-legged sprawlers, hugging the ground for warmth. Lizards didn't have the energy to stand on their hind legs for more than a few seconds. But the dinosaurs stood on straight legs, and many walked erect on their hind legs. Among living animals, erect posture occurred only in warm-blooded mammals and birds. Thus, dinosaur posture suggested warm-bloodedness. Next, they studied metabolism, calculating the pressure necessary to push blood up the 18-foot-long neck of a brachiosaur, and concluding that it could only be accomplished by a four-chambered, hot-blooded heart. They studied trackways, fossil footprints left in mud, and concluded that dinosaurs ran as fast as man. Such activity implied warm blood. They found dinosaur remains above the Arctic Circle, in a frigid environment unimaginable for a reptile. And the new studies of group behavior, based largely on Grant's own work, suggested that dinosaurs had a complex social life and reared their young, as reptiles did not. Crocodiles and turtles abandoned their eggs, but dinosaurs probably did not. The warm-blooded controversy had raged for 15 years before a new perception of dinosaurs as quick-moving, active animals was accepted, but not without lasting animosities. At conventions, there were still colleagues who did not speak to one another. But now, if dinosaurs could be cloned, why, Grant's field of study was going to change instantly. The paleontological study of dinosaurs was finished. The whole enterprise, the museum halls with their giant skeletons and flocks of echoing school children, the university laboratories with their bone trays, the research papers, the journals, all of it was going to end. "You don't seem upset," Malcolm said. Grant shook his head. "It's been discussed in the field. Many people imagined it was coming, but not so soon." "Story of our species," Malcolm said, laughing. "Everybody knows it's coming, but not so soon." As they walked down the path, they could no longer see the dinosaurs, but they could hear them trumpeting softly in the distance. Grant said, "My only question is, where'd they get the DNA?" Grant was aware of serious speculation in laboratories in Berkeley, Tokyo, and London that it might eventually be possible to clone an extinct animal such as a dinosaur, if you could get some dinosaur DNA to work with. The problem was that all known dinosaurs were fossils, and the fossilization destroyed most DNA, replacing it with inorganic material. Of course, if a dinosaur was frozen, or preserved in a peat bog, or mummified in a desert environment, then its DNA might be recoverable. But nobody had ever found a frozen or mummified dinosaur, so cloning was therefore impossible. There was nothing to clone from. All the modern genetic technology was useless. It was like having a Xerox copier, but nothing to copy with it. Ellie said, "You can't reproduce a real dinosaur because you can't get real dinosaur DNA." "Unless there's a way we haven't thought of," Grant said. "Like what?" she said. "I don't know," Grant said. Beyond a fence, they came to the swimming pool, which spilled over into a series of waterfalls and smaller rocky pools. The area was planted with huge ferns. "Isn't this extraordinary?" Ed Regis said. "Especially on a misty day, these plants really contribute to the prehistoric atmosphere. These are authentic Jurassic ferns, of course." Ellie paused to look more closely at the ferns. Yes, it was just as he said. Serena veriformans. A plant found abundantly in fossils more than 200 million years old, now common only in the wetlands of Brazil and Colombia. But whoever had decided to place this particular fern at poolside obviously didn't know that the spores of veriformans contained a deadly beta-carboline alkaloid. Even touching the attractive green fronds could make you sick, and if a child were to take a mouthful, he would almost certainly die. The toxin was 50 times more poisonous than oleander. People were so naive about plants, Ellie thought. They just chose plants for appearance, as they would choose a picture for the wall. It never occurred to them that plants were actually living things, busily performing all the living functions of respiration, ingestion, excretion, reproduction, and defense. But Ellie knew that, in the Earth's history, plants had evolved as competitively as animals, and in some ways more fiercely. The poison in Serena veriformans was a minor example of the elaborate chemical arsenal of weapons that plants had evolved. There were terpenes, which plants spread to poison the soil around them and inhibit competitors. Alkaloids, which made them unpalatable to insects and predators, and children. And pheromones, used for communication. When a Douglas fir tree was attacked by beetles, it produced an anti-fedant chemical, and so did other Douglas firs in distant parts of the forest. It happened in response to a warning aliochemical secreted by the trees that were under attack. People who imagined that life on Earth consisted of animals moving against a green background seriously misunderstood what they were seeing. That green background was busily alive. Plants grew, moved, twisted, and turned, fighting for the sun. And they interacted continuously with animals, discouraging some with bark and thorns, poisoning others, and feeding still others to advance their own reproduction, to spread their pollen and seeds. It was a complex, dynamic process which she never ceased to find fascinating, and which she knew most people simply didn't understand. But if planting deadly ferns at poolside was any indication, then it was clear that the designers of Jurassic Park had not been as careful as they should have been. "Isn't that just wonderful?" Ed Regis was saying. "If you look up ahead, you'll see our safari lodge." Ellie saw a dramatic low building with a series of glass pyramids on the roof. "That's where you'll all be staying here in Jurassic Park." Grant's suite was done in beige tones, the rattan furniture in green jungle print motifs. The room wasn't quite finished. There were stacks of lumber in the closet and pieces of electrical conduit on the floor. There was a television set in the corner with a card on top. Channel 2, Hypsilophodont Highlands. Channel 3, Triceratops Territory. Channel 4, Sauropod Swamp. Channel 5, Carnivore Country. Channel 6, Stegosaurus South. Channel 7, Velociraptor Valley. Channel 8, Pterosaur Peak. He found the names irritatingly cute. Grant turned on the television but got only static. He shut it off and went into his bedroom, tossed his suitcase on the bed. Directly over the bed was a large pyramidal skylight. It created a tented feeling, like sleeping under the stars. Unfortunately, the glass had to be protected by heavy bars so that striped shadows fell across the bed. Grant paused. He had seen the plans for the lodge, and he didn't remember bars on the skylight. In fact, these bars appeared to be a rather crude addition. A black steel frame had been constructed outside the glass walls, and the bars welded to the frame. Puzzled, Grant moved from the bedroom to the living room. His window looked out on the swimming pool. "By the way, those ferns are poison," Ellie said, walking into his room. "But did you notice anything about the rooms, Alan?" "They changed the plans." "I think so, yes." She moved around the room. "The windows are small," she said, "and the glass is tempered, set in a steel frame. The doors are steel-clad. That shouldn't be necessary. And did you see the fence when we came in?" Grant nodded. The entire lodge was enclosed within a fence, with bars of inch-thick steel. The fence was gracefully landscaped and painted flat black to resemble wrought iron, but no cosmetic effect could disguise the thickness of the metal or its 12-foot height. "I don't think the fence was in the plans either," Ellie said. "It looks to me like they've turned this place into a fortress." Grant looked at his watch. "We'll be sure to ask why," he said. "The tour starts in 20 minutes. When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth. They met in the visitor building, 2 stories high and all glass with exposed black anodized girders and supports. Grant found it determinedly high-tech. There was a small auditorium dominated by a robot Tyrannosaurus Rex, poised menacingly by the entrance to an exhibit area labeled "When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth." Farther on were other displays. "What is a dinosaur?" and "The Mesozoic World." But the exhibits weren't completed. There were wires and cables all over the floor. Gennaro climbed up on the stage and talked to Grant, Ellie, and Malcolm, his voice echoing slightly in the room. Hammond sat in the back, his hands folded across his chest. "We're about to tour the facilities," Gennaro said. "I'm sure Mr. Hammond and his staff will show everything in the best light. Before we go, I wanted to review why we are here, and what I need to decide before we leave. Basically, as you all realize by now, this is an island in which genetically engineered dinosaurs have been allowed to move in a natural park-like setting, forming a tourist attraction. The attraction isn't open to tourists yet, but it will be in a year. Now, my question for you is a simple one. Is this island safe? Is it safe for visitors? And is it safely containing the dinosaurs?" Gennaro turned down the room lights. "There are 2 pieces of evidence which we have to deal with. First of all, there is Dr. Grant's identification of a previously unknown dinosaur on the Costa Rican mainland. This dinosaur is known only from a partial fragment. It was found in July of this year, after it supposedly bit an American girl on the beach. Dr. Grant can tell you more later. I've asked for the original fragment, which is in a lab in New York, to be flown here so that we can inspect it directly. Meanwhile, there is a second piece of evidence. Costa Rica has an excellent medical service, and it tracks all kinds of data. Beginning in March, there were reports of lizards biting infants in their cribs, and also, I might add, biting old people who were sleeping soundly. These lizard bites were sporadically reported in coastal villages from Ismaloya to Punta Arenas. After March, lizard bites were no longer reported. However, I have this graph from the Public Health Service in San Jose of infant mortality in the towns of the West Coast earlier this year. I direct your attention to 2 features of this graph, Gennaro said. First, infant mortality is low in the months of January and February, then spikes in March, then it's low again in April. But from May onward, it is high, right through July, the month the American girl was bitten. The Public Health Service feels that something is now affecting infant mortality, and it is not being reported by the workers in the coastal villages. The second feature is the puzzling bi-weekly spiking, which seems to suggest some kind of alternating phenomenon is at work. The lights came back on. "All right," Gennaro said. "That's the evidence I want explained. Now, are there any—" We can save ourselves a great deal of trouble, Malcolm said. I'll explain it for you now. You will? Gennaro said. Yes, Malcolm said. First of all, animals have very likely gotten off the island. Oh, balls, Hammond growled from the back. And second, the graph from the Public Health Service is almost certainly unrelated to any animals that have escaped. Grant said, How do you know that? You'll notice that the graph alternates between high and low spikes, Malcolm said. That is characteristic of many complex systems. For example, water dripping from a tap. If you turn on the faucet just a little, you'll get a constant drip, drip, drip. But if you open it a little more so that there's a bit of turbulence in the flow, then you'll get alternating large and small drops. Drip, 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 drip. Like that. You can try it yourself. Turbulence produces alternation. It's a signature. And you will get an alternating graph like this for the spread of any new illness in a community. But why do you say it isn't caused by escaped dinosaurs? Grant said. Because it is a nonlinear signature, Malcolm said. You'd need hundreds of escaped dinosaurs to cause it, and I don't think hundreds of dinosaurs have escaped. So I conclude that some other phenomenon, such as a new variety of flu, is causing the fluctuations you see in the graph. Gennaro said, But you think that dinosaurs have escaped? Probably, yes. Why? Because of what you are attempting here. Look, this island is an attempt to recreate a natural environment from the past, to make an isolated world where extinct creatures roam freely. Correct? Yes. But from my point of view, such an undertaking is impossible. The mathematics are so self-evident that they don't need to be calculated. It's rather like my asking you whether, on $1 billion in income, you had to pay tax. You wouldn't need to pull out your calculator to check. You'd know tax was owed. And, similarly, I know overwhelmingly that one cannot successfully duplicate nature in this way, or hope to isolate it. Why not? After all, there are zoos. Zoos don't recreate nature, Malcolm said. Let's be clear. Zoos take the nature that already exists and modify it very slightly to create holding pens for animals. Even those minimal modifications often fail. The animals escape with regularity. But a zoo is not a model for this park. This park is attempting something far more ambitious than that, something much more akin to making a space station on Earth. Gennaro shook his head. I don't understand. Well, it's very simple. Except for the air, which flows freely, everything about this park is meant to be isolated. Nothing gets in, nothing out. The animals kept here are never to mix with the greater ecosystems of Earth. They are never to escape. And they never have, Hammond snorted. Such isolation is impossible, Malcolm said flatly. It simply cannot be done. It can. It's done all the time. I beg your pardon, Malcolm said, but you don't know what you are talking about. You arrogant little snot, Hammond said. He stood and walked out of the room. Gentlemen, Gennaro said. I'm sorry, Malcolm said, but the point remains. What we call nature is in fact a complex system of far greater subtlety than we are willing to accept. We make a simplified image of nature and then we botch it up. I'm no environmentalist, but you have to understand what you don't understand. How many times must the point be made? How many times must we see the evidence? We build the Aswan Dam and claim it is going to revitalize the country. Instead, it destroys the fertile Nile Delta, produces parasitic infestation, and wrecks the Egyptian economy. We build the... Excuse me, Gennaro said, but I think I hear the helicopter. That's probably the sample for Dr. Grant to look at. He started out of the room. They all followed. At the foot of the mountain, Gennaro was screaming over the sound of the helicopter. The veins of his neck stood out. You did what? You invited who? Take it easy, Hammond said. Gennaro screamed, Are you out of your goddamned mind? Now look here, Hammond said, drawing himself up. I think we have to get something clear. No, Gennaro said. No, you get something clear. This is not a social outing. This is not a weekend excursion. This is my island, Hammond said, and I can invite whomever I want. This is a serious investigation of your island because your investors are concerned that it's out of control. We think this is a very dangerous place, and—" "You're not going to shut me down, Donald." "I will if I have to." "This is a safe place," Hammond said, "no matter what that damn mathematician is saying." "It's not." "And I'll demonstrate its safety." "And I want you to put them right back on that helicopter," Gennaro said. "Can't," Hammond said, pointing toward the clouds. "It's already leaving." And indeed, the sound of the rotors was fading. "God damn it," Gennaro said. "Don't you see you're needlessly risking—" Hammond said. "Let's continue this later. I don't want to upset the children." Grant turned and saw two children coming down the hillside, led by Ed Regis. There was a bespectacled boy of about 11 and a girl a few years younger, perhaps 7 or 8, her blonde hair pushed up under a Mets baseball cap and a baseball glove slung over her shoulder. The two kids made their way nimbly down the path from the helipad and stopped some distance from Gennaro and Hammond. Low, under his breath, Gennaro said, "Christ." "Now take it easy," Hammond said. "Their parents are getting a divorce, and I want them to have a fun weekend here." The girl waved tentatively. "Hi, Grandpa," she said. "We're here."